I turned 53 the night my life was served like a cake I didn't bake. Balloons floated in the house I furnished. Streamers draped the chandelier I chose. And every face I loved froze as I walked in. Zuri, my daughter-in-law, with a smile sharp enough to open envelopes, threw her arms wide and shouted, "Surprise!" then set a manila packet in front of me like a detonator. Abram, my husband of 25 years, stood behind her with his hands on her shoulders. "You're not entitled to anything," he said. "We're getting married." I smiled, placed the papers down carefully, and told them both. "Enjoy." The silence that followed sounded like a house realizing it had new owners. Pink and gold ribbons trembled in the air conditioning, and the expensive perfume cloud around Zuri made the room feel sticky. She had chosen a cream dress that looked poured onto her, and the confidence on her face suggested she had staged this scene down to the flicker of the candles. My sister Janet's eyes begged me not to explode. Mrs. Henderson from next door gripped her wine like a rope. Abram wouldn't look me in the eye. "Where's Michael?" I asked, because our son had never missed my birthday in 28 years. "Business trip," Zuri said, smooth as satin. She guided me to the table and sat me at the head like a queen being retired from service. The cake my recipe, but professional and too perfect, waited in front of me. I traced the scalloped frosting and thought about all the dinners I had served here, all the arguments I had softened with dessert. Abram cleared his throat. "There's no easy way to say this," he began. Zuri spared him the effort. "We're getting married as soon as this is final." She wanted the spectacle. Her friends in the kitchen whispered like stagehands. I had the sudden, sobering sense I'd been written out of a play in my own house. I slid the envelope back across the table, stood, smoothed my skirt, and thanked them for the party. Zuri blinked, surprised I hadn't cried on cue. "That's it?" she asked, the word dear hovering in the air between us, unspoken. "Enjoy the cake," I said instead, and walked out. The Hampton Inn off Route 9 smelled like lemon cleanser and endings. I sat on the edge of a bed with sheets that crackled under their starch and read my marriage on paper. Irreconcilable differences, dissolution, division of assets that divided me out of most things I had dusted, washed, and scheduled for decades, a modest monthly allowance. My car, the rest house, investments, heirlooms assigned a future tense that did not include me. If grief was supposed to howl, mine didn't. Detachment settled over me like a hotel blanket, thin, impersonal, just warm enough to keep me from shivering. Janet texted to ask where I was, whether I was safe. I set the phone face down and stared at the ceiling until the embossed pattern turned into a map with no roads home. By morning, I had a practical plan: clothes, documents, photographs, the bones of a life I could carry. Abram's car was gone when I pulled into the driveway, but Zuri's silver Mercedes glinted in the sun like a trophy precisely parked. I let myself in with the key no one had asked me to surrender, just grabbing a few things. I called, because manners were harder to shed than vows. She appeared at the top of the stairs wearing my silk robe, its tie a neat bow at her waist. "You're early," she sang, floating down as if she'd rehearsed the entrance. "Abram thought it best if you made a list, and we'll have everything packed and sent." The dismissal was velvet-covered steel. I smiled like a woman with no place to sit and veered toward the guest room, where I kept file boxes that had followed us through moves and mortgages. There are certain sounds that belong to marriage: a drawer sliding open, papers whispering in a stack, the snap of a folder's clasp. My fingers found tax returns, insurance policies, Medical forms I had filled out while Abram nodded at doctors, tucked behind an insurance binder. I discovered a slim manila folder with a business card clipped to it. Davidson Investigations. Discretion guaranteed. Inside, surveillance photographs made from long lenses captured Zuri with shorter hair. Darker hair. No smile at all. Zuri entering buildings I didn't recognize. Meeting men I'd never seen. Accepting an envelope from a woman whose suit matched the color of money. One frame caught a kiss that didn't belong to my son or my husband. The air in the room changed. I could feel it the way sailors feel weather. Find what you were looking for. Her voice came from the doorway, sweet as a blade. I closed the folder without flinching. Just documents. I said. She stepped closer, eyes on the box, gaze flicking back to my hands. None of this is personal. She murmured. Abram and I, what we have is real. These things just happen. How long, I asked. Her face rippled, then smoothed. It's not healthy to dwell. She reached to touch my arm, light as a moth, but her fingers tightened when they met my skin. For the first time since our lives had braided together, I saw it fear swimming under polish. I took the folder and the business card, thanked her for the hospitality I no longer needed, and left like a woman leaving a museum, quiet, observant, remembering the frames. In the safety of my car, I dialed the number. Davidson. A gravel voice answered on the second ring. This is Clarice Morton, I said. You worked for my husband. A pause lengthened the way truth does when it's deciding whether to step into the light. Mrs. Morton, he said at last. I was wondering when you'd call. Can we meet? You're going to want to? He replied. There are things you need to know about your daughter-in-law, things your husband chose to ignore. The parking lot of the strip mall where his office lived was sun-bleached and unremarkable, squeezed between a dry cleaner and a tax place that promised maximum refund. He slid a thick folder across the desk, as if he were returning a library book, careful, a little sad. Your husband hired me 8 months ago, he said. He suspected something about her but wouldn't name it. The report called my daughter-in-law by a different name. The photographs repeated what my eyes had already learned, that Zuri's face was a costume she wore different ways. As Davidson spoke, a strange, precise calm rose in me, something like the feeling before a storm when you've already brought in the lawn chairs and closed the windows. I had lost a marriage, yes, but I had found a story, and stories told right could change the ending. Davidson had the weary posture of a man who spent his days sorting lies. He opened the folder and let the documents speak first, a birth certificate that did not match the name we knew. County records stamped with a history that had been sanded smooth. Marriage licenses scattered across states like breadcrumbs left for no one. Your daughter-in-law was born Zara Petrovsky, he said, voice even, like a doctor delivering results he had repeated too often. She learned to disappear by changing very little: the hair, the city, the posture, the type of man she courts. Enough to look new, never enough to seem false. He tapped photographs that froze her in unguarded motion, entering offices after hours, leaving restaurants with men who were not my son, accepting a thick envelope from a woman in a suit the color of old coins. These are not affairs, he continued. They are workflows. She marries for access. She earns proximity to accounts. She withdraws affection when she can withdraw cash. Each marriage lasts just long enough for the paperwork to open doors. He slid to the final page, a timeline lined with notes in pencil. Abram hires me 8 months ago. Full report delivered 6 months ago. Client requests investigation closed 2 months ago. My breath turned into something small and sharp. He knew, I said, not as a question. He knew and told no one, not even our son. Davidson watched me register it. He said he needed time. He replied, "When some men say time, they mean deniability." I stared at the row of facts and felt the first clean anger I'd had in years. Anger that didn't flail, didn't plead, didn't pretend. Davidson read the temperature and nudged the legal pad between us. "First, you stop the bleeding," he said. "You are still married. Close joint accounts. Transfer balances to new accounts in your name only. Open a safe deposit box. Keep copies of everything." I hesitated, and he cut me off with a gentler voice. "This is not theft. This is triage. You are stabilizing a patient who is hemorrhaging." He added a line I didn't know I needed. "You are allowed to survive." Then he pointed to a column of deposits that did not belong to our family. "She's been feeding a private account. All cash. My estimate is close to $200,000 within 6 months. Source unclear." He turned a page to show a headshot plucked from a law firm's website. "She meets regularly with a divorce attorney who prides himself on creative access. If she cannot pry open your accounts as Michael's wife, she will pry them open as Abram's next spouse." I asked what he recommended. He said the word every woman raised to be agreeable must learn to pronounce without apology. Act. By 9:15 I was at the first bank smiling like a model client and asking to withdraw everything. The teller blinked, conferred with a manager, and produced forms. By 11:40 I had opened new accounts across town, passwords committed to muscle memory. A safe deposit box gliding shut on copies of Davidson's files with a soft, decisive click. By 2:05 p.m. I had closed the 6th joint account and walked into the sunlight with a sensation I recognized dimly from childhood, the thrill of doing something I wasn't supposed to do for all the right reasons. The first voicemail from Abram arrived at 3:20 p.m., righteous and loud. The second at 4:10 p.m., wounded and stern. The third at 5:00 p.m., strategic and soft. I deleted them in order and felt lighter each time, like I was sweeping a floor I had long pretended wasn't dirty. I ate dinner alone at a diner that believed in real butter, and I let the ordinary sound of cutlery remind me that life went on a few tables over from catastrophe. Zuri found me the next morning at 8:05 in the hotel restaurant, slid into my booth as if we had always planned to meet, and folded her hands like a woman who came bearing mercy. "You've been difficult to reach," she said, tone bright enough to bounce. The banks phoned. I buttered toast slowly and met her gaze. She set her phone on the table face up. A photograph of me walking into Davidson's office glowed on the screen. "Private investigators can be useful," she said, almost fond. "They can also make very costly introductions. The threat wore perfume. I let it evaporate. I did some reading too," I replied, and showed her a screenshot of a Chicago article about a young woman charged in an elder insurance scheme who looked like her with different hair. "Charges dropped for lack of evidence," I said. "But the choreography seems familiar." For the first time, something inside her faltered, then stiffened. "You think you know the game, Clarice?" she said, lowering her voice. "You don't know the players." She leaned closer, and a brittle candor flashed through the paint. "There are people who expect money back with interest, and they do not send reminders by mail." How much I asked, because naming numbers drags ghosts into daylight. She stared at me as if deciding whether I could stand the figure. $800,000, she said at last, plus interest. The audacity of it snapped something straight in me. You will divorce my son, I said, my voice as even as a level table. You will end the affair with my husband you call love. You will leave this city. You have 24 hours. She laughed, a single hard note. Then she studied my face and understood I was not trying on a costume. You'll never find all the threads to pull, she murmured. And if you tug the wrong one, the wrong people will notice. Let them notice me. I answered. Then they'll stop noticing him. She sat back, and the perfect posture sagged just enough to show a seam. You have no idea what you've just done, she said, but the menace tasted like fear. I paid the check, stood, and told her what I believed would save me even if it never touched her. You mistook my silence for weakness, I said. That is your only mistake I intend to forgive. Outside. The morning had switched to the kind of gray that promises rain without delivering it. I called Davidson from the curb and told him I had set a clock in motion. He was quiet for a beat, then said, we might have to move faster than we had planned. Desperation makes people inventive, he warned, and some inventions explode. I returned to the hotel to pack, and the adrenaline finally trembled itself out of my hands. I lay down at 11:30 p.m., certain sleep would avoid me, and then woke to the hammer of the phone at 3 neuro. My son's voice already breaking before I could say his name, telling me Zuri was in the hospital and asking me to come. The emergency room at 3:35 a.m. smelled like antiseptic and the inside of a clock. Michael was pacing under fluorescent lights, hair uncombed, eyes bright with panic that made him look 13 again. She called me crying, he said, grabbing my hands with fingers still cold from outside. They hurt her in the parking lot. She's asking for you. A doctor with a compassionate voice led us to a small room where Zuri lay propped up with a bandage above her eyebrow and a hospital bracelet that made her look human. She reached for me like a castaway sees a shore. Clarice, she whispered. Thank God. When the doctor left, she asked for a moment alone, and Michael, desperate to be useful, stepped into the corridor. The moment the door shut, the fear evaporated from her face like steam. Her grip on my wrist turned iron. You clever woman, she hissed. You thought you could corner me. Instead, you lit a beacon. I pulled back, but she dug her nails in just enough to leave crescents. Your little investigator stirred up questions, she continued. Now the wrong people think I stashed their money with your family. My phone, as if on cue, vibrated with voicemails from unfamiliar numbers. One was a detective out of Chicago, another a voice without a name reminding me that some debts are collected by men who carry batons they do not wear on duty. 2 days. The message said, return what's ours or we take collateral. Zuri watched me listen, then shut my phone with practiced tenderness. You'll fix this, she said softly. You'll convince your men to liquidate what they must. $2 million. Cash. Untraceable. And I disappear. Or you can wait for them to knock on your son's door. Her eyes found mine, steady, merciless. Tick, tick. Michael came back in at 3:50, with coffee he didn't drink and a heart already breaking. He asked what had happened. Zuri let a single tear slip and told him the truth braided with a lie that I had hired a private investigator because I couldn't stand her. That inquiries had reached dangerous ears, that now everyone connected to her was in jeopardy. She folded her fear into a plea and tucked it in his pocket. We can't involve the police, she whispered, squeezing his hand. They have friends everywhere. He turned to me, devastated, and asked if I had done this. I told him I had hired Davidson to protect our family. Zuri lowered her eyes in a masterstroke of choreography. Michael's voice went flat. You emptied the accounts, hired spies, and now she's hurt. You need help. Mom. The word mom lifted, then fell. He was too kind to shout, too frightened to consider I might be right. He helped the nurse settle Zuri for observation and said he would take her somewhere safe when she was discharged. Zuri watched me over his shoulder with a look that said I was already out of the house and halfway to nowhere. 2 days. Her mouth formed, without sound. I left at 4:20 a.m. The hour when hospitals and marriages look most alike, too bright, too tired, full of strangers' charts. The parking lot was damp, a drizzle beginning. I called Davidson as soon as I shut the car door. He answered on the second ring, voice gravel and caffeine. I told him about the call from Chicago, the threat, Zuri's extortion. He listened without interrupting, then said 3 sentences that changed the air. No one attacked her. The wound is staged, and the dangerous people are not loan sharks. He was already sitting at his desk with a new file open. I kept digging, he said. The deposits we flagged match withdrawals from a charity fund in Chicago. The amount missing is just over $800,000. The principal trustee reported anomalies 6 months ago. Federal agents took the case. I stared through the windshield at my own reflection, framed by streetlights. So the people after her are the police. I said, she is creating chaos to buy time. He confirmed it, then added what I had been too exhausted to deduce if she could turn Michael against me and keep Abram paralyzed by shame. She could still crack the accounts before a warrant arrived. You asked me how to stop her, he said. Now you decide how to be seen stopping her. By 5:05, we had a plan that felt like putting down a live wire with steady hands. He would pass the location to a federal contact. I would not call anyone else. I would go quiet. The choice held its own kind of grief. I would not be the person who dialed justice. Even if I had opened the door for it, I would be the person who slept while the tide turned. Davidson's voice gentled. Go home, he said. You still have a key. You still have standing. In the morning, there will be bigger news than where you lay your head. I drove through a city that smelled like wet pavement and dawn, pulled into the driveway of the house I had tended for a quarter century, and let myself in. Abram was asleep, the kind of sleep that looks like surrender. For a long minute, I watched the man I had loved wear the face of a boy who'd been tricked by his own hungers. I did not wake him. I took the guest room, lay atop the quilt in my clothes, and breathed for the first time in days as if the air could belong to me. The phone rang at 600 a.m. Janet's voice crackled with outrage and intimate concern. Turn on channel 7, she said, not bothering with hello. The headline unfurled like an answer to a prayer I had not known how to phrase. A woman using multiple aliases, wanted in connection with an embezzlement scheme that siphoned more than $800,000 from a cancer charity, had been arrested at St. Mary's Hospital shortly before 5:30 a.m. The anchor said she had married into a local family under the name Zuri, that federal agents had acted on a tip, that a trial was anticipated. They showed her in handcuffs, hair imperfect, posture broken, beauty rearranged by daylight and consequence. In the living room, Abram appeared in flannel pants and disbelief. He stared at the screen, then at me, as if I had conjured both our past and the morning news. Clarice, he said, voice hoarse. How did you? I shook my head. I didn't, I said truthfully. This was always coming. He sank onto the couch like a man realizing the chair he had chosen held nails. The report listed prior marriages, a pattern prosecutors loved, a pattern wives recognized. He covered his face with his hands, then dropped them like weights. "What have I done?" he asked the air. The better question, unsaid, pressed between us. What had we both allowed? I poured coffee at 6:20 a.m. and set a cup on the table he had once called ours. "Michael," I said. "Call him." He dialed and got voicemail. We sat in the growing light, listening to a house reconfigure its loyalties. At 6:45 a.m., my phone rang with my son's name. His voice was raw and too quiet. "Mom?" he said. "Can you come get me?" I asked where. "The Marriott downtown, room 412. He replied. And the boy who had never missed my birthday sounded like a child calling from a sleepover that had gone wrong. I took my keys. Abram reached for my arm and asked to come. I told him no with the gentleness of a boundary spoken for the first time. "This is between me and my son," I said. "You'll have your turn with the truth." I left him in the doorway, a man surrounded by rooms he suddenly recognized as evidence. Michael opened the hotel door at 7:10 a.m. and collapsed into my arms with the kind of cry men are taught to swallow. We sat on the edge of the bed like we had when he was a feverish child, hands clasped, the air of the room smelling faintly of detergent and panic. He tried to apologize and I let him. Then I stopped him before he could invent sins I hadn't asked him to carry. I told him what I had seen and what Davidson had proved. I told him about the folder tucked behind our insurance papers, about names that changed like costumes, about the deposits that matched withdrawals from a charity that had trusted the wrong smile. He listened without interrupting, his gaze fixed on the carpet as if truth could be read in the fibers. When I finished, he took a long breath and said the sentence that mattered most. "I believe you now?" We walked to a cafe at 8:05 a.m. and held hot cups we didn't drink, making a simple plan the way overwhelmed people must 1 hour at a time. He would call a lawyer who owed him nothing and therefore could be trusted. He would authorize the bank to flag any attempt by anyone to alter his accounts. He would write a statement for the agents who would surely ask, and he would not add flourishes to the facts to make himself look better or worse. "I loved her," he said, a confession without defense. That explains everything. I told him, and excuses nothing. That is how adults live. By 9:30, I drove him to the house because hiding from his father would only make the next conversation harder. Abram met us at the door with a face that looked older than it had at 6:00 a.m., as if consequences had finished drawing their lines. For a moment we stood like strangers waiting for an elevator, all of us staring at the floor. Michael spoke first, his voice thin but stable. "You knew 6 months ago," he said to his father. "Why didn't you tell me?" Abram's mouth opened, then closed on a dozen justifications that no longer fit. "Shame," he said at last, "and hope. I thought I could fix it without exposing anyone. I thought I could be clever and kind at the same time." Michael nodded once, not accepting, not forgiving, merely cataloging. "You cannot protect us by lying to us," he said, and the sentence landed like a plank laid across a ravine. Abram turned to me and asked the question he had asked before. "Can you ever forgive me?" I gave him what I still owed myself, an answer honest enough to be useful. "Not today," I said. "Maybe not ever. But I will not let my anger make me cruel. We will divide our lives with decency and lawyers, and we will show our son what accountability looks like." He nodded. the kind of nod men give when they have finally decided to stop arguing with gravity. At 11 or, we walked into a federal office that smelled like coffee and copy paper and told agents what we knew. They were not surprised by our story. They were surprised we had not told it sooner. Michael's hands shook as he signed his statement. But he did not edit his words to protect the father he adored, or the version of himself he preferred. He wrote it all the whirlwind courtship, the charm that felt like sunlight, the slow rearrangement of boundaries that looked like love until it didn't. When he finished, he pressed the pen into my palm as if passing a baton. I signed the receipts for the files Davidson had duplicated and told the truth about the night the cake tasted like a verdict. An agent with tired eyes thanked us in a tone that was almost kind. "You're not the first family to be good at pretending," she said. "You won't be the last." What followed was not dramatic enough for television, and therefore exactly what we needed. Lawyers redrafted papers with language that recognized damage done and property earned. The house was listed and sold. The proceeds were divided by people who read from statutes and not from grudges. I moved into a bright apartment with windows that made morning look like a promise, and I learned the ritual of doing small things, fresh flowers on Thursdays at 9 a.m., a walk past the river at 5:30 p.m., a text to my sister every Sunday at 4:00 p.m. Because a life is rebuilt in ordinary increments, not grand gestures. Michael returned to work slowly. He started therapy on Wednesdays at 6:00 and did not tell anyone who might mistake his courage for weakness. He stopped asking why he had been fooled and started asking how he would be different. Abrams signed papers without arguing and let a new humility rinse the corners of his speech. He apologized without a flourish and did not demand an answer. For once, that was enough. The day the indictment came down, the charge list sounded like a grim syllabus: wire fraud, identity theft, conspiracy to commit embezzlement, a pattern of conduct the prosecutor called relational predation. The amount missing from the charity, more than $800,000, was recited with the quiet outrage reserved for crimes committed against the sick and generous. Reporters called, and we declined all interviews. Michael asked whether he should attend the trial. I told him what I had learned in the ruins of my birthday closure is not an event you witness. It is a habit you practice. On the first day of testimony at 9:15 a.m., he went to work, did his job, and came home to the kind of dinner that doesn't have a moral attached. 6 months later, I sat on my balcony at 7:10 p.m., watching windows light in other buildings like squares on a quilt. A breeze moved the curtains and the smell of someone else's dinner floated up, reassuring in its anonymity. My phone buzzed with a message from Michael. "Thinking of you. Grateful." I sent back a heart and the photograph of a ridiculous sunset only mothers send. I thought of the woman I had been so skilled at smoothing, so eager to be untroublesome that I had mistaken silence for virtue. I thought of Davidson's plain permission. "You are allowed to survive." I had learned to call it something more expansive. "You are allowed to live on your own terms." The difference was not a slogan. It was a practice. It meant I no longer negotiated with my self-respect. It meant I believed that boundaries are not walls, but doors that only open inward. And it meant I could look at the worst night of my life and call it the beginning rather than the ending. If you've stayed with me to this moment, thank you. If this story found the bruise under your ribs and named it, take a breath with me. We do not always get to choose what breaks us. We always get to choose how we rebuild. Like, share, and subscribe if you want more true-hearted stories about how people lose themselves and find a better version on the way back. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from and one thing you've decided to stop apologizing for.